She arrived on a Tuesday. There was no ceremony to it, no dramatic entrance with music or lights. The door to the lecture hall simply opened, and she walked in. But the effect on the room was immediate, as if someone had pulled all the warmth out of the air and replaced it with something sharp and cold. Her name, or at least the name she gave, was Sethkai Ren. She was Najori, and every student in the room knew what that meant. The Najori were scaled humanoids, lean and elegant, with skin the color of dark iron and eyes like polished silver mirrors. They moved the way water moves over stone, smooth, fluid, and without wasted effort. The Najori Dominion was known across the coalition for many things, but above all it was known for one cultural institution that made other species deeply uncomfortable. The Najori practiced formalized assassination. It was not a secret, it was not a crime in their society. It was a profession, a discipline, an art form taught in shadow academies from the time a child could hold a blade. Their operatives were considered the most dangerous individuals in the galaxy outside of active war zones. Sethkai walked to the front of the room and stood beside Professor Voron, who introduced her with the kind of careful neutrality that a person uses when they are holding something fragile and do not want it to break. He explained that she was a transfer student participating in a cultural exchange program approved by the Academy's governing board. He did not say the word operative. He did not need to. Everyone already knew. The room reacted the way a forest reacts when a predator steps into a clearing. The Falesi at the back huddled together, their fur standing on end. A Gorvathi student near the window made a sound that was somewhere between a whimper and a cough. Lin Ko's 4 hands gripped the edge of her desk so tightly that the color drained from her knuckles, turning them a pale and sickly blue. The chemical scent of fear pheromones from half a dozen species filled the air, and the room's ventilation system hummed louder as it tried to scrub the atmosphere clean. Sethkai's silver eyes swept the room. She catalogued every face, every posture, every trembling limb. She had been trained to read fear the way a musician reads notes on a page, and this room was a symphony of it. She felt nothing in response. Fear in others was simply information, a tool, a lever that could be pushed or pulled as needed. Then, her gaze reached the back corner of the room, and she stopped. Cole Brannigan was leaning back in his chair with his arms folded behind his head. His legs were stretched out under the desk in front of him. He was looking directly at her, and he was grinning. Not a nervous grin, not a forced grin. Not the kind of smile that a prey animal makes when it is trying to appear larger than it is. It was a genuine, relaxed, interested grin. The kind of expression a person makes when something unexpected and entertaining has just walked through the door. Sethkai's training kicked in automatically. She read his body. No elevated pulse visible in the arteries of his neck. No dilation of his pupils. No micro-tremors in his hands, no shift in his weight toward an exit. The human was not experiencing a fear response. He was experiencing curiosity, maybe even amusement. She felt something move through her that she could not immediately name. It was not fear. She had been stripped of fear before she was old enough to remember having it. It was closer to confusion, a small crack in the smooth surface of her certainty, and she did not like it. She filed it away in the part of her mind where she kept things that needed further analysis, and she took her seat. The days that followed were strange for everyone. Sethkai participated in class with cold efficiency. When Professor Voron discussed historical assassination attempts between species, she corrected his facts with calm precision. When he presented case studies of diplomatic failures that led to targeted killings, she offered insights into methodology that left the other students staring at her with a mixture of horror and fascination. She spoke about death the way a carpenter speaks about wood, with familiarity, respect, and no emotional attachment whatsoever. Most students avoided her entirely. They changed their walking routes to avoid passing her in the hallway. They chose seats as far from her as the lecture hall allowed. A small group of Falesi filed a formal complaint with the administration, requesting that Sethkai be removed from their class. The complaint was denied. Cole did not avoid her. He engaged with her directly during class discussions, asking questions and pushing back on her arguments with a casualness that made the other students hold their breath. One afternoon, Sethkai described the Najori philosophy of the perfect kill. Silent, unseen, leaving no trace, a death so clean that the target's allies would not even know what had happened until it was far too late. She spoke about it with the reverence of someone describing a great painting or a beautiful piece of music. Cole listened carefully, and then said, "That is interesting. Back on Earth, we had a saying. The best swordsman in the world does not fear the second best swordsman. He fears the worst swordsman, because he has no idea what that fool is going to do." He paused, and then added, "Unpredictability is its own kind of weapon." Sethkai looked at him for a long moment. She opened her mouth to respond, then closed it. She did not have a ready answer, and this bothered her more than she wanted to admit. After class, Lin Kuo grabbed Cole's arm with 2 of her 4 hands and pulled him into a quiet corridor. Her eyes were cycling through deep shades of violet, which Cole had learned meant she was very scared. "You need to stop talking to her like that," Lin Kuo whispered, her voice trembling. "She is Najori. She could kill you without anyone knowing." Cole looked down at his friend and smiled gently. "I appreciate you worrying about me." "I am not worrying. I am panicking. There is a difference." "Fair enough," Cole said. He put a hand on her shoulder, carefully, because he knew that human hands were heavy and warm in a way that could be overwhelming for a Tesavari. "I will be careful, I promise." Lin Kuo searched his face for reassurance. She found something there, something deep and steady that she could not quite identify. It was not recklessness. It was not ignorance. It was something older and heavier, a kind of knowing that sat behind his easy smile, like a stone at the bottom of a river. She wanted to ask him about it, but she did not know how, so she let go of his arm and nodded. That night, alone in her quarters on the far side of the station, Sethkai Ren sat in perfect stillness and opened an encrypted communication channel. The signal bounced through 6 relay stations and arrived at a receiver buried deep inside the Najori Dominion's intelligence network. Her handler appeared on the screen, a face she knew only as a silhouette, a voice she knew only as a series of clipped, precise instructions. "Your assessment of the academy environment," the handler said. It was not a question. "Standard educational facility, minimal security, no significant threats among the student population." She paused. "With one exception. The human." "Yes." Then a file appeared on her screen. It was a target dossier, the kind she had received dozens of times before, the kind that came with a name and a photo and a set of instructions that ended with a body going cold somewhere quiet. She opened it. Cole Brannigan's face looked back at her from the screen. He was smiling in the photo, the same easy grin she had seen in the lecture hall. Below the photo was a classification she had never encountered in all her years of training. It read, Apex Deathworld Predator, Threat Level Unknown. Unknown. Not high, not extreme. Unknown. The Najori Dominion did not use that word lightly. It meant they did not have enough information to make a determination. It meant they were afraid of what a determination might reveal. Her handler's voice came through the speakers one final time. Evaluate. Report. If necessary, eliminate. You have full operational discretion. Sethkai sat in the dark and stared at the photo of the human who had grinned at her when everyone else in the room had trembled. She closed the file and began to plan. Sethkai began with observation. It was always the first step. You did not strike at something you did not understand, and she did not yet understand Cole Brannigan. She watched him in every setting the Academy offered. She watched him in class, where he sat in his usual spot and listened to lectures with a relaxed attention that she found difficult to read. She watched him in the cafeteria, where he ate meals that he covered in some kind of red liquid from a small bottle he kept in his jacket pocket. She watched him in the training halls, where the Academy ran physical assessments designed to test the capabilities of its multi-species student body. And she watched him in the corridors between classes, where he walked with an unhurried stride and stopped to talk with anyone who would let him. That last detail annoyed her. Cole was friendly with everyone. He helped a group of Felesi students carry equipment that was too heavy for their small frames. He sat with a lonely Gorvathi in the cafeteria and listened to the creature talk about its homeworld for nearly an hour. He had even learned 3 words in the Tesavari language, so he could greet Lin Ko in her own tongue each morning. And the way her eyes lit up every time he did it made Sethkai feel something she quickly pushed away. Friendliness was a weakness in her world. Connection was a chain. Attachment was a handle that an enemy could grab and use to drag you wherever they wanted. Cole handed out these handles freely to everyone, as if he did not care that any one of them could be used against him. But the physical assessment was where Sethkai first began to feel genuinely unsettled. The Academy's obstacle course was designed for species from moderate gravity worlds. It included climbing walls, balance beams, agility tunnels, and a series of reaction time challenges that tested reflexes across multiple sensory inputs. Most students completed it with effort and some with difficulty. The Felesi were fast but tired quickly. The Gorvathi were strong but clumsy. Lin Ko's 4 arms gave her advantages on the climbing sections, but she struggled with the ground-level sprints. Cole moved through the course without urgency. He did not rush. He did not show off. He simply moved, and his body did what it needed to do with an ease that looked almost lazy. His time was faster than anyone else in the class. When Sethkai checked the numbers afterward, she found that he had beaten the second-place finisher by a margin that should not have been possible for a species that did not specialize in any single physical trait. Humans were not the fastest, or the strongest, or the most agile species in the coalition. But they were good enough at everything, and that, Sethkai was beginning to realize, was far more dangerous than being exceptional at one thing. She watched the replay footage of him taking a fall from the climbing wall. He had slipped near the top, a drop of about 4 meters onto a hard surface. Any Tesavari would have broken bones. Most Gorvathi would have been bruised badly enough to withdraw from the assessment. Cole hit the ground, rolled with the impact in a movement so practiced it looked like instinct, stood up, brushed the dust from his knees, and kept going. His expression did not change. He did not even look down at the spot where he had landed. Sethkai began her tests. She started small. She acquired a vial of drethane, a mild neurotoxin derived from deep-sea organisms on a colony world in the Tesavari system. It was colorless, odorless, and would cause nausea, disorientation, and muscle weakness in most galactic species within minutes. She introduced a carefully measured dose into Cole's food during a cafeteria meal, using a technique she had perfected at the age of 9. Cole ate the meal. He paused mid-bite, frowned, poked at the food with his fork, and muttered something about the cafeteria having an off day. Then he finished the entire plate, drank a glass of water, and went to his next class. Sethkai watched him for the rest of the day from a distance. He showed no symptoms, none at all. His body had processed the toxin the way a furnace processes kindling, completely and without effort. She increased the dosage the next day. Same result. Cole complained that the food tasted funny, and added more of his red sauce. HFY moved on to behavioral testing. She arranged a physical provocation using a Grotharn student named Vask, a heavy-set reptilian who owed her a favor after she had helped him avoid a disciplinary issue. She positioned herself in a concealed alcove with a recording device and instructed Vask to shoulder-check Cole hard in a narrow corridor, simulating the kind of casual aggression that might trigger a threat response. Vask did as he was told. He came around the corner and drove his shoulder into Cole's chest, with enough force to knock a smaller species off their feet. Cole stumbled back a step, caught his balance, and looked up at the Grotharn. Vask was half a head taller than him and probably twice his weight. "Hey, no worries," Cole said, his voice easy and warm. "Tight hallway." Vask, who had been prepared for a confrontation, blinked in confusion and walked away without a word. But HFY had seen something. She reviewed the footage that night, slowing it down frame by frame, and there it was. In the half-second between the impact and Cole's friendly response, something had happened. His body had changed. His weight dropped into his legs. His hands opened, fingers slightly curved. His jaw tightened, and his eyes, those soft brown human eyes, locked onto Vask's throat with a focus so intense and so brief that her recording equipment barely captured it. It lasted less than a heartbeat. Then it was gone, buried beneath a smile and a kind word, as if it had never existed. HFY replayed that fraction of a second 17 times. She ran Cole's reaction time through her analysis software and compared it against the known baselines of every species in the Coalition's database. It did not match any of them. The only profiles that came close were those of ambush predators from high-threat ecosystems, creatures that spent their lives waiting in stillness and then exploding into violence with no warning. Cole Brannigan was not a friendly student who happened to come from a dangerous world. He was a predator who had taught himself to wear friendliness like a coat. And beneath that coat, something was always watching, always calculating, always ready. HFY began researching Earth. She accessed the Coalition's restricted files on human biology, history, and warfare. She read for hours, and the deeper she went, the worse it got. She read about persistence hunting, the strategy where ancient humans would choose an animal and simply follow it, walking and jogging across open land for hours and hours, never sprinting, never stopping, until the animal's body overheated and it collapsed from exhaustion. The humans would then walk up to the dying creature and finish it. They did not need to be faster, they just needed to never stop. She read about the human immune system, a biological warfare engine that fought millions of microscopic battles every day. She read about human bones, which broke and then healed stronger than before. She read about adrenaline, the chemical that flooded human bodies during danger and temporarily increased their strength, speed, and pain tolerance to levels that their own muscles and joints could not safely handle. Meaning that humans could, in moments of crisis, literally tear themselves apart from the inside in order to survive. And then she read about the wars. Not skirmishes, not border disputes, not the careful, limited conflicts that most galactic species engaged in when diplomacy failed. She read about wars that consumed entire continents, wars that lasted for years, wars in which humans developed weapons that could split the fundamental building blocks of matter itself. They had pointed these weapons at each other and used them, and then they had looked at the ashes and the shadows burned into stone, and they had decided not to stop making the weapons, but to try very hard not to use them again. They had built that restraint not on logic or biology, but on a choice, a collective and fragile agreement that they would be better. And after every war, every catastrophe, every extinction-level disaster they inflicted on themselves, they built again. They painted, they wrote music, they fell in love, they held their children and told them stories and reached for the stars with hands that still had blood under the fingernails. HFY closed the files and sat in the dark of her quarters. She was still for a very long time. Her training had prepared her for strong enemies, clever enemies, fast enemies. It had not prepared her for an enemy who was all of those things, and also kind. It had not prepared her for the possibility that the most dangerous species in the galaxy was dangerous precisely because it chose every single day not to be. The following afternoon, Cole found Lin Ko after class and mentioned, almost casually, that he had noticed HFY watching him more than usual. Lin Ko's eyes went dark purple. What do you mean, more than usual? She is always watching everyone. She is Nashori. Yeah, but it is different. It is focused, he shrugged. Just something I picked up. Cole, this is serious. If she is targeting you, then I will deal with it. How? He smiled at her, and there was that weight again, that deep and steady thing behind his eyes that Lin Ko could not name. I am going to go talk to her. The next day, after the lecture hall had emptied and the corridors had gone quiet, Cole leaned against the wall outside the classroom and waited. He heard her footsteps before he saw her. Light, precise, nearly silent. She rounded the corner and found him standing there with his hands in his pockets. So, Cole said, meeting her silver eyes without flinching, are you going to keep circling, or are we going to talk about it? HFY's body reacted before her mind did. Her weight shifted to the balls of her feet. Her fingers loosened at her sides, the retractable claws beneath her fingertips tingling with the readiness to extend. Every hour of training she had ever received screamed the same word at her. Deny, deflect, create distance, reassess from a position of control. But she did not move. Something about the way Cole was standing there stopped her. He was not braced for a fight. He was not cornered or desperate or angry. He was leaning against a wall with his hands in his pockets, looking at her the way someone looks at a person they have been meaning to have a conversation with, and have finally found the right moment. There was no threat in his posture. There was patience. She had never been disarmed by it. I do not know what you mean, she said, and even as the words left her mouth, she knew how hollow they sounded. Cole tilted his head slightly. Yeah, you do. You have been watching me for weeks. Not the way the other students watch me, not from a distance because they are scared. You have been studying me, running tests. I did not catch all of them, but I caught enough. HFY said nothing. Her silver eyes were fixed on his face, reading him the way she had been reading him since the day she arrived. Pulse steady, breathing normal, no fear, no anger, just that calm, heavy presence that she had come to associate with something she still could not fully name. I am not upset about it, Cole continued. I get it. I would probably do the same thing if I were you. New species, unknown capabilities, your people want to know what they are dealing with. That is just smart intelligence work. Not at the words themselves, but at how easily he had said them. He spoke about intelligence work the way she spoke about it, as a fact of life, a tool, something that existed because the galaxy was complicated and dangerous and full of unknowns. How did you know? She asked. The question came out before she could stop it, and she hated herself for asking it. Humans have been spying on each other for as long as we have existed, Cole said. He smiled, and it was not the easy grin she had seen in the classroom. It was something quieter, something that carried weight. We invented espionage. We built entire institutions around it. We had agencies with thousands of people whose only job was to watch other people and figure out what they were going to do before they did it. I grew up reading about that stuff. I know what it looks like when someone is running an assessment on me. The Academy's lights had dimmed to their evening setting, casting everything in a soft blue glow that made Cole's shadow stretch long against the floor. HFY made a decision. It was small and quiet and felt like stepping off the edge of something very high. she asked. "Why are you not afraid of me?" Cole was quiet for a moment. He took his hands out of his pockets and crossed his arms over his chest, not in a defensive way, but in the way a person does when they are thinking carefully about how to say something true. "That is a good question," he said, "and the honest answer is kind of complicated. But I will try." He paused, choosing his words. "You think that because I am not afraid of you, it means I do not understand what you are. But that is not it. I know exactly what you are. I knew the moment you walked into that classroom. I have seen that walk before. I have read about people who move like you. On Earth, we had our own versions of you. People trained from childhood to be weapons, to kill quietly, to disappear without a trace. So no, it is not that I do not understand the danger. I do." "Then why?" Cole looked at her, and for the first time, Sethkai saw something behind his eyes that was not warmth, or humor, or patience. It was old. It was tired. It was the look of someone who had carried something heavy for a very long time, and had made peace with the weight of it. "Because humans are afraid all the time," he said. "Every single day. Earth is a world that is trying to kill us every moment we are alive. Earthquakes, hurricanes, diseases that mutate faster than we can cure them, predators, volcanoes, each other." He let that last part hang in the air. "Fear is not something that happens to us sometimes. It is the background noise of our entire existence. It is always there. We just learn to walk around with it. We learn to eat breakfast with it, and go to work with it, and fall in love with it, and raise children with it. We do not get rid of the fear. We just do things anyway." He paused again, and when he spoke next, his voice was softer. "I have been afraid every day since I got to this academy. Not of you, not of anyone here. Just the basic grinding fear of being the only one of my kind in a place where everyone looks at me like I am a bomb that might go off. That is a lonely kind of fear. But I got on the shuttle and I came here anyway, because that is what humans do. We show up." Sethkai stood very still. Something inside her was shifting, a deep and structural thing. Like a wall that had been standing for so long she had forgotten it was built and not grown. The Najori Shadow Academies taught that the greatest warrior was the one who felt nothing. Fear was weakness. Attachment was weakness. Everything that made a person was, in the Najori system, a flaw to be trained away. And here stood a human who carried all of those things: fear, attachment, hesitation, loneliness, and was still the most composed individual in any room he entered. She could not reconcile it. The equation did not balance. And for someone whose entire life had been built on equations that always balanced, this was deeply and profoundly disorienting. She heard herself speak, and the words surprised her, even as they came out. She told him about her mission. Not all of it. Not the operational details, or the chain of command, or the extraction protocols, but the shape of it. She told him that the Najori Dominion considered humanity an unpredictable element in galactic politics. She told him that she had been placed at the Academy to evaluate whether he, as a representative of his species, was a threat that needed to be dealt with. Cole's expression did not change. He listened the way he always listened, fully, quietly, with that steady attention that she was beginning to think might be the most dangerous thing about him. When she finished, he asked, "And what is your assessment?" Sethkai looked at him for a long time. She thought about the poison he had eaten without noticing. She thought about the fraction of a second in the hallway, when something ancient and violent had surfaced behind his eyes, and then vanished. She thought about the files she had read, the wars and the weapons, and the persistence hunting, and the art, and the love, and the reaching for the stars. "You are the most dangerous thing I have ever encountered," she said. "Not because of what you can do, but because of what you choose not to do." The words hung between them like smoke. Then the alarm went off. It was not a drill alarm. Sethkai knew the difference immediately. Drill alarms were steady and rhythmic, designed to create urgency without panic. This alarm was sharp and irregular, a sound designed to trigger the deepest survival instincts of every species in the station. Red lights began to flash in the corridor. Professor Voron's voice came over the intercom, tight and controlled, but with an edge of fear that Sethkai had never heard from him before. There had been a containment breach in the biological research wing on the lower levels of the station. A specimen had escaped. A Vrelox, a six-limbed apex predator from a quarantined Deathworld, equipped with neurotoxic saliva and a hunting pattern based on vibration detection. The creature was loose in the lower corridors. Security teams were mobilizing, but their estimated arrival time was 20 minutes. And then the part that made Cole's entire body go still. A group of 12 students were trapped in a study hall on the lower level, directly in the creature's path. The study hall's emergency locks had engaged, sealing them inside, but the door would not hold if the Vrelox found them. Among the trapped students was Ling Kuo. 20 minutes. For a creature that could kill a room full of unarmed students in seconds, 20 minutes was a lifetime. Or the end of 12 of them. Cole looked at Sethkai. His expression had changed. The warmth was still there, but it had been joined by something else, something cold and sharp and very, very focused. He did not ask for permission. He did not ask for help. He did not waste a single second on doubt or deliberation. "I am going," he said, and he started moving toward the lower levels with a stride that was nothing like the casual walk she had observed for weeks. This was the walk of something that had decided where it was going and what it was going to do when it got there. Sethkai stood alone in the flashing red corridor. She could feel the vibration of emergency bulkheads slamming shut throughout the station. She thought about her mission. She thought about her training. She thought about the cold, clean equations that had governed every decision she had ever made. Then she thought about 12 students trapped behind a door that would not hold, and a human walking toward a monster because his friend was on the other side of it. The lower levels of the academy were a different world. The overhead lights were flickering in broken rhythms where the Vrelox had torn through power conduits in its rampage, and long stretches of corridor were plunged into total darkness between each stuttering flash. The air was thick with a chemical stench, sharp and sour, like burnt metal and rotting fruit. Sethkai recognized it from her files, the territorial markings of a Vrelox, a scent designed by evolution to trigger fear responses in every living thing that smelled it. Cole moved differently now. Everything that Sethkai had observed about him over the past weeks, the easy posture, the relaxed shoulders, the unhurried stride, was gone. It had been replaced by something older and truer. His steps were silent. His breathing was slow and controlled. His eyes moved constantly, scanning every shadow, every doorway, every ventilation grate, with a focus that was almost mechanical in its precision. His body was low and balanced, his weight centered, his hands open and ready at his sides. He was not the friendly exchange student from Texas anymore. He was what the planet Earth had spent millions of years building, a predator that had climbed to the top of a world that killed everything it could. Sethkai fell into step beside him without discussion. Her own training took over like a second heartbeat, and she moved with the fluid silence that the Najori Shadow Academies had spent her entire childhood perfecting. She noticed immediately that they were not coordinating. They were not leading or following. They were simply moving together, two hunters from very different worlds, who had independently arrived at the same conclusions about how to move through a dark corridor towards something that wanted to kill them. The realization sent a chill through her that had nothing to do with the temperature. They reached the study hall in 4 minutes. The door was sealed. Heavy emergency plating that had dropped into place when the alarms triggered. Through the thick metal, They could hear sounds from inside. Muffled voices, soft crying, and beneath it all, Ling Kuo's voice, shaking but steady, talking to the other students, telling them to stay quiet, to stay still, to breathe. Cole pressed his hand flat against the door and closed his eyes for just a moment. When he opened them again, whatever softness had been left in his expression was gone. From 2 corridors away, they heard it, the clicking of 6 clawed limbs on metal flooring, slow and rhythmic, like a massive insect tapping its way through the dark. And beneath the clicking, a low, wet sound. The creature's breathing, heavy and gurgling, filtering air through the toxin glands in its jaw. Cole turned to Sethkai. He spoke in a low voice, barely above a whisper, and laid out a plan in less than 30 seconds. The Vrellox, hunted by vibration. It could feel footsteps through the floor from dozens of meters away. Its eyesight was poor, but its sensitivity to motion and sound was extraordinary. Cole would draw it away from the study hall. He would make noise, create vibration, pull the creature toward him and lead it through the corridors. Sethkai would get the door open, evacuate the students through a maintenance shaft he had spotted on the way down, and seal it behind them. Sethkai shook her head. A single individual against a Vrellox has a survival probability close to 0. Cole looked at her, and he grinned. That same grin from the first day. That same steady, unshakable, absolutely infuriating grin. Those are better odds than a lot of things I have survived, he said. He moved before she could say another word. He walked 20 meters down the corridor, planted his feet, and slammed his open palm against the metal wall 3 times. The sound rang through the lower levels like a bell. The clicking of the Vrellox stopped. The silence that followed was worse than any noise. Then the clicking started again, faster this time, and it was coming toward him. Cole turned and ran. Sethkai forced herself to move. She reached the study hall door and went to work on the lock. It was a standard emergency seal, designed to keep things out, rather than to resist deliberate bypass. Her claws extended, thin and precise as surgical tools, and she had the access panel open in seconds. She rerouted the locking mechanism, and the door hissed open. 12 faces stared at her from inside. Falesi, Gorvathi, Tessavari, and others, all of them huddled together in the center of the room, trembling, their eyes wide and wet with terror. And among them, standing at the front, with her 4 arms spread, as if she could shield them all with her body, was Ling Kuo. Ling Kuo stared at Sethkai. Her eyes were dark with fear, cycling through colors so fast they looked almost black. She saw the Najori operative standing in the doorway, with her claws extended and her silver eyes burning in the flickering light. And for a terrible moment, she did not know whether the thing at the door was a rescue or just a different kind of death. "Move," Sethkai said. Her voice cut through the panic like a blade through silk. "Maintenance shaft, end of the corridor, 30 meters to your left. Single file, now." Nobody argued. There was something in her voice, in her posture, in the absolute authority of a person who had been trained since birth to command terrifying situations, that overrode every instinct, telling them to huddle and hide. They moved. Ling Kuo went last, herding the others, and as she passed Sethkai in the doorway, she asked the only question that mattered. "Where is Cole?" Sethkai did not answer. She sealed the students into the maintenance shaft, engaged the locks, and confirmed that the shaft led to an upper level beyond the containment zone. They were safe. Then she turned around and went back into the dark. She followed the sounds, crashing metal, the scream of the Vrellox, a sound like tearing steel that resonated through the walls. And beneath it, the heavy breathing and running footsteps of a human who was doing something that no rational species would consider sane. She found them in a cargo bay 3 levels down. Cole had led the creature through a maze of corridors, using the environment with a desperate creativity that SciFy would later spend hours analyzing. He had slammed blast doors to funnel it into narrow spaces where its 6 limbs became a liability. He had triggered fire suppression systems that filled corridors with foam, blinding its vibration senses for precious seconds. He had torn panels from walls and thrown them down side passages to create false trails of noise and movement. But the Vrellox was fast, and it was relentless, and Cole was running out of space. He was backed against the far wall of the cargo bay. His left arm hung at an angle that made SciFy's stomach tighten, dislocated at the shoulder, maybe broken. A deep gash above his right eye was sending a curtain of blood down his face. His shirt was torn, and there were burns on his skin where the creature's neurotoxic saliva had splashed him. His breathing was ragged, his legs were shaking, and he was grinning. The Vrellox circled him slowly. It was enormous up close, 2 meters tall at the shoulder, its 6 legs spread wide, its jaw hanging open to reveal rows of translucent teeth dripping with milky venom. It moved with the patient confidence of something that knew its prey was cornered. For the first time in her adult life, she acted on something other than calculation. She came in from behind, silent as shadow, and her claws found the gaps between the plates of the creature's exoskeleton with the precision of a surgeon. She drove them deep. The Vrellox screamed and whipped its massive body around, throwing her sideways with a sweep of its forelimb. She hit the wall hard enough to see white, but she rolled and came up on her feet because she was Najori, and falling down was not something the Shadow Academies allowed. But the moment of distraction was enough. Cole surged forward. In his right hand was a broken metal strut, a piece of wall support he had torn free during his running fight through the corridors. He moved with everything he had left, every drop of adrenaline, every ounce of that Deathworld endurance, every bit of the stubborn, impossible, beautiful human refusal to stop. And he drove the jagged end of the strut into the soft tissue beneath the creature's jaw. The Vrellox made a sound that was not a scream. It was something smaller, something almost surprised. Its 6 legs folded beneath it, one by one, and it sank to the floor of the cargo bay like a building coming down. It twitched once, twice, and then it was still. Cole dropped to one knee. The strut fell from his hand and clattered on the floor. His body was shaking, his breath coming in short, harsh gasps, his skin flushed and burning where the toxin had touched him. He looked like a man who had been through a war, because in a very real sense, he had. SciFy stood on the other side of the dead creature. Her claws were still extended, dark with the Vrellox's blood. She was breathing hard, her ribs aching from the impact with the wall. She looked at Cole across the body of the thing they had killed together, and he looked at her, and something passed between them that neither of them would ever be able to put into words. It was not romance. It was not friendship, not exactly. It was recognition, the deep and wordless understanding of one predator looking at another, and seeing for the first time not a threat, but a mirror. Academy security arrived 7 minutes later. They found the Vrellox dead on the cargo bay floor, and 2 figures sitting side by side against the far wall. A human and a Najori, both bleeding, neither speaking, sharing a silence that felt more honest than any words either of them had ever been taught. In the days that followed, the Academy launched a full investigation. Professor Voron testified on behalf of both Cole and SciFy, his mandibles clicking with emotion, as he told the board that their actions had saved 12 lives. The investigation concluded that the containment breach was caused by a maintenance failure, and that no disciplinary action was warranted against either student. The Najori Dominion recalled SciFy's mission, though not for the reasons anyone expected. Her handler received her final assessment report via encrypted channel. It was brief, precise, and unlike anything the Dominion's intelligence division had ever received from a field operative. It read, "Target is not a threat to be neutralized. Target is a force to be understood. Recommend full diplomatic engagement with the human species. They are not what we assumed. They are more." Her handler read the report 3 times. Then he forwarded it up the chain without comment, because there are some conclusions that speak for themselves. Weeks later, the semester continued. The academy repaired its lower levels. The Vrelok specimen was incinerated, and the research wing received new containment protocols that were significantly more robust than the previous ones. Cole sat in his usual seat in Professor Veron's class, his arm in a regenerative cast that itched constantly, and that he poked at with a stylus when he thought no one was looking. Lin Kuo sat beside him, closer than she used to, her 4 hands folded in her lap, her eyes a steady warm gold that Cole had learned meant she felt safe. She said something to him, something quiet and probably funny, and Cole laughed, a real full laugh that made 3 Philesi students in the front row flinch, and then slowly, cautiously, smile. 2 rows behind him, Sefkai Ren sat with her spine straight and her silver eyes forward. Her posture was still perfect. Her face was still guarded. She was still, in every measurable way, an operative of the Najori Dominion. But when Cole turned around and caught her eye, she allowed the faintest trace of a smile to cross her face. It was small. It was brief. It was, by Najori standards, an earthquake. At the front of the room, Professor Voron watched all of this with his compound eyes, seeing more than any of them realized. That evening, alone in his office, he opened his personal journal and wrote a single entry. "I have spent 40 years studying interspecies conflict. Today I am beginning to understand that the most dangerous species in the galaxy may also be the most hopeful. The humans do not conquer their fear. They befriend it. And somehow, against all logic and reason, they make others brave enough to do the same. I do not know what the future holds for this strange, terrifying, wonderful species. But I suspect it holds more than any of us are prepared for. And for the first time in my career, that does not worry me. It gives me hope." He closed the journal, turned off the light, and left his office with a feeling he had not experienced in a very long time. The quiet, stubborn belief that things might turn out all right after all. Counselor Vreth Domai had spent 40 cycles serving the Shile Dominion as a diplomat, and in all that time, he believed he had seen everything the galaxy had to offer. He had walked through the crystal towers of the Valerie homeworld. He had survived a trade negotiation with the Drathan war clans without losing a limb, which was considered an achievement in itself. He had watched the Nyx Collective reshape an entire moon into a living organism just because they could. Vreth was not easily impressed, and he was certainly not easily frightened. But the humans made him uneasy, and he could not figure out why. They had joined the Galactic Coalition only 12 standard years ago, which was barely a heartbeat in the life of civilizations that counted their histories in millennia. Yet somehow, in that tiny window of time, they had become the most talked-about species in known space. Every station Vreth visited, every diplomatic hall he entered, someone was whispering about the humans. The stories were wild and contradictory. Some said they were warriors without equal. Others said they were reckless fools who survived on luck alone. A Nyx biologist once told Vreth that humans were the only species in the galaxy that could function on no sleep, broken bones, and what they called spite. Vreth had looked up the word and found it meant a desire to do something specifically because someone else said it could not be done. He had not known what to do with that information. Now, standing on the observation ring of the orbital station above Oneth 4, Vreth was about to see the humans up close for the first time. The occasion was the 38th Interstellar Crucible, the most prestigious military and tactical competition in the galaxy. It was held once every galactic decade, and every major civilization sent its finest soldiers to compete. The Crucible was not just a war game. It was a test of everything a species could bring to the field: strength, intelligence, endurance, strategy, and the ability to adapt when everything went wrong. Winning the Crucible meant galactic respect. Losing it badly meant galactic embarrassment. The competition world, Oneth 4, was a harsh place. The Galactic Coalition had terraformed it specifically for the Crucible, filling it with every kind of hostile environment imaginable. Frozen mountains, volcanic plateaus, dense fungal jungles, and ruined cities built just to be fought over. It was not a place designed for comfort. It was a place designed to break people. Vreth arrived 3 days before the opening ceremony. The orbital station was already packed with delegations from across the galaxy. The Drathan war clans had brought a team of 40 massive reptilian warriors, each one standing over 8 feet tall, with thick scaled hides and jaws that could bite through starship hull plating. They marched through the station corridors in perfect formation, their heavy footsteps shaking the floor, and every other species stepped aside to let them pass. The Valerie Empire had sent a sleek, cybernetically enhanced unit of 30 soldiers. Their bodies were a blend of flesh and machine, every muscle optimized, every reflex accelerated by implanted processors. They moved with an eerie, mechanical grace that made them look less like living beings and more like weapons that happened to breathe. The Nyx Collective had fielded a team of shapeshifters, biological specialists who could alter their own cellular structure to adapt to any environment. They did not look like much in their natural state, just pale, soft-bodied figures with large dark eyes. But Vreth knew better than to underestimate them. A Nyx soldier could grow gills in minutes, harden its skin into armor, or sprout additional limbs if the situation required it. Vreth's own Shale Dominion had a respectable team of 25, all trained in logistics, communication, and tactical support. The Shale were not frontline fighters. They were thinkers and planners, and they took pride in that role. And then there were the humans. Vreth first saw them in the station's main concourse on the second day. He had expected something impressive, towering figures in advanced power armor perhaps, or soldiers bristling with exotic weapons. What he saw, instead, was a group of about 30 men and women, in simple dark gray uniforms, standing around in loose clusters, talking and laughing as if they were waiting for a bus, rather than preparing for the most important military competition in the galaxy. Their leader was a man named Nate Grady. He was broad-shouldered and solid, somewhere in his early 40s, with short brown hair and a face that looked like it had been weathered by years of hard use. He stood with his hands in his pockets, watching his team with a faint, relaxed smile that made him look like a man enjoying a Sunday afternoon, rather than a commander about to lead his people into a galactic trial. Beside him was his second-in-command, Lieutenant Katie Marsh, a smaller woman with dark hair pulled back tight, and eyes that moved constantly, scanning the room, cataloging every face and every exit with quiet intensity. Vreth watched a Drathan warlord walk past the human group and snort with open contempt. "These are the famous humans?" the warlord said to his companion, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "They look like prey." Katie Marsh glanced at the warlord, and for just a moment, something flickered across her face. Not anger, not fear, but something cold and patient, like a hunter marking a target for later. Then she looked away and went back to her quiet observation. A Valori admiral standing near Vreth shook his head. "A novelty entry," he said dismissively. "They will not survive the second phase." Vreth's own Shale colleagues agreed. "Interesting to study," one of them said, "but not a serious contender." Everyone seemed certain of this. The humans were too young, too small, too soft, too poorly equipped. Their reputation was just noise, exaggerated stories from minor skirmishes on the galactic fringe. The real powers would show them what true military excellence looked like. Vreth wanted to agree. It would have been comfortable to agree, but something nagged at him, a feeling he could not name, like an itch behind his eyes. On the third day, the opening ceremony was held on the surface of Oneth IV, in a massive natural amphitheater carved into black volcanic rock. Thousands of spectators filled the tiered seats, diplomats, journalists, military analysts, and curious citizens from dozens of worlds. Vreth sat in the neutral observer section, a datapad on his knee, ready to take notes. Each species presented its team in turn. The Drathin marched out in thunderous lockstep, roaring a war chant that shook the air and made several smaller species flinch. The Valori glided out in perfect synchronization, their cybernetic implants glowing faintly blue, a holographic war banner shimmering above them. The Nyx Collective flowed onto the field in a constantly shifting formation, their bodies rippling and changing color in a display of biological mastery. The Shale Dominion marched out crisply, their formation tight and professional. The humans came out last. There was no war chant. There was no holographic banner. There was no display of power or technology or biological superiority. 30 men and women in dark gray uniforms walked out onto the field in a loose, comfortable group, as if they were taking a walk together rather than presenting themselves to the galaxy. Commander Nate Grady walked to the center of the field. He stood there for a moment, looked up at the thousands of faces staring down at him, and gave a single short nod. Then he turned around and walked back to his team. That was it. The crowd murmured. Some laughed. A Drathin warrior bared his teeth in amusement. A Valori officer tilted his head as if trying to process an error. But Vreth did not laugh. He sat very still in his seat, his datapad forgotten on his knee, and stared at the humans as they stood quietly on their section of the field. He could not explain what he was feeling. It was not admiration. Not yet. It was not fear. Not exactly. It was something closer to the feeling he got when he looked at a storm on the horizon and knew with absolute certainty that it was going to be much worse than it looked. The crucible was about to begin, and Vreth had the sudden, uncomfortable feeling that everyone in the galaxy was about to learn something they were not prepared for.